Well, today I've managed to persuade the fantastic Ben Fryer to come on the show. He is the co-founder of Diverse Interactive, an independent experience agency specializing in virtual reality and augmented reality. So welcome, Ben.
Hiya.
Ben, do you want to start off by spending a few minutes just talking about you, your experience, and how you help your clients at Diverse?
Sure. So we've been an agency now for 7 years, and we specialize not only sort of creating great immersive content, so a lot of AR and VR, but we always sort of build that on really sound technology and kind of a lot of bespoke software development. And now really, I'm very happy to say this, we really specialize in the metaverse and everything around that sort of feels like what we've been doing for the last 7 years. And now it's sort of out and about, and, we're just helping brands and businesses utilize that space.
This is one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on, Ben, because I know that you've been working in this space for so long and you're ahead of the curve in terms of what's happening. But for many people, the metaverse has become a bit of a buzzword. So would you mind sort of explaining, how do you define the metaverse?
Sure. Okay. So, this is a sort of challenge at the moment, I think, because, opening the metaverse hasn't got a kind of set definition at the moment. So I think, I can give you my definition and hopefully that'll help. And it probably does come with that footnote, this is technology, so it's probably out of date by the time you hear it. But, I guess sort of my view on this is, I like to see the metaverse as really, you can imagine it as the kind of universe of all persistent augmented reality and virtual reality experiences. So sort of put that another way, any kind of virtual reality that you can consume through some kind of device, not necessarily a VR headset, but one of these realities that you can kind of enter, consume and leave, but that reality's still there. So you can kind of come and go from that. And a sort of another way to put that, if you're sort of familiar with AR and VR, you might have heard of the term XR, which sort of encompasses those. So again, it's almost like this sort of convergence of XR and the internet really coming together to kind of provide the metaverse, really.
Is the metaverse, would you say that it's here now, or is it coming, or at what stage do you think we are?
Sure. So yeah, again, another very, very common question. So, I like to describe this, and a sort of an analogy I often use is, if I was to ask you something like, when did the first smartphone exist? That's a really hard question to answer. It's a set of technologies that sort of came together to give you a sort of mobile phone device, and that increasingly got more and more connected and capable, and it became a smartphone. And I think the metaverse it's in a similar sort of come together in a similar sort of way. This is really a lot of technologies coming together, mainly around the internet, although I do say that it's not the internet. I've heard that one as well. But, the internet's really the infrastructure. So these technologies are kind of coming together, and they're allowing us to have increasingly more connected and realistic virtual realities that we can kind of enter to and exit. And, you're seeing that, in your homes now, people are aware of sort of games, Roblox, Minecraft, these sort of realities that we're starting to consume are just becoming more and more a part of our lives.
Would you say that the gamers are kind of ahead of the curve in terms of already having experienced more of a virtual world?
I guess maybe that sort of, I don't like sort of say generations, but I guess, yeah, there are people who are probably more used to these type of experiences. But I think, it's just sort of changing. We've been doing a lot of AR and VR, for businesses, enterprise for a long time, and I like to include it all. Really, it's all just the more and more we're adopting these kind of technologies. I think VR, for example, this year for we've sort of done the Zoom calls and everything like that, and now we're starting to use sort of VR, and it's just becoming part of our lives. And I sort of really like to think of it that way.
One of the things that recently I had someone on the show talking about Web3, and I did a talk recently about the future of account management and the evolution towards Web3, and for account managers to keep their eye on what the future and what's happening in the next 10 years. But for you as an expert, I'd love to ask you specifically, how do you see that the Web3 and the metaverse Are they linked? Are they different? Are they the same? Like, can
Okay.
you put any kind of clarity around the similarities or differences, or are they just one thing?
Yeah, no, that's another really good question. So again, this can be an area that's a little bit sort of confusing at the moment. So, Web3, I think if you sort of go back to my previous answer, the internet isn't, it's helping give us this metaverse. We might run the metaverse on some other network of computers in the future, but Web3 for me is really part of the internet. So it's not sort of necessary for the metaverse. We can create you a connected virtual reality experience that you can go and consume without Web3. But what Web3 is really providing is a very useful technology for the metaverse. So this sort of blockchain movement, this decentralization, and really the power there at the moment within, I'll call them smart contracts rather than NFTs. I find that a more useful term, really. But that's, it's providing very useful services. So when you're creating these virtual worlds or virtual realities, if you want to have virtual products or goods, or know who owns what in these large sort of realities, that this is kind of sort of enabling it. And in a way, they're sort of, they're almost sort of entwined. They're kind of driving each other at the moment. So I think that's where the real connection comes, because they're both evolving at the same time and both sort of powering each other in a way.
There seems to be a huge amount of excitement about Web3. And I think there's a lot of acknowledgement that we're at the very early stages. And
yeah, absolutely.
Like you said, the buzzword of NFTs, and there's this kind of polarizing debate about what's an NFT. It's a waste of time. It's nothing. But actually what you've just said, it's the smart contract that sits underneath it.
Yeah, I mean, almost wish they hadn't called it NFT. So what's an non-fungible token, really? It's the powers this ability to write an application into the blockchain, and you can create any kind of contract. People are still sort of coming up with new ways to use that, but anything around owning any kind of content, land ownership, tickets, all sorts you can do with that space at the moment. But it's all really useful stuff for the metaverse.
And I think it's quite cool that the art or the creative world have kind of taken the initiative with it, and they're at the forefront, isn't it? I love to see that they are now finally getting reimbursed for their creativity and their art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is quite exciting. How do you think that the metaverse is going to change how we currently live, work, play, communicate, buy things, like do everything? Like, what do you see as changing?
Okay, so again, another really good question. And I think, if you probably think about something like the internet, the early days of the internet, that as a technology has changed so much over the years. And I really put the metaverse kind of almost level with that in the way that I think it is going to impact this. We're already sort of starting to see it sort of coming into play. We mentioned games earlier, but sort of VR headsets are coming into the home. I know you've given a Quest to go, so you can tell me about that in a minute. But yeah, it's a huge kind of space, like the internet. But a whole bunch of technologies. I don't think as well, people often forget things like, I see augmented reality being part of the metaverse. So people like Niantic, they're big players at the moment. They're sort of branded kind of the real world metaverse, which I really like. So, it's not just about going and getting lost in a virtual reality headset. There's technologies coming like smart glasses, things like that are really going to bring the metaverse to us, just like as convenient as our kind of smartphones. And those are still sort of virtual realities, when we're out and about consuming the metaverse. So there's just so many applications at the moment to kind of get involved and use this technology.
So you think that, I mean, because you're right, I did recently buy the Oculus, finally, the Quest, is it Quest 2?
That's it, yeah.
I've just been absolutely blown away. Yeah. Absolutely trying to get all of my family and friends to have a look. This is incredible. I mean, I know you've experienced this way before I'd ever did, but so what you're saying is we're not in the future. You don't see the fact that we're going to be wearing these big clunky glasses. They're going to be smart glasses, so presumably a lot kind of smaller, thinner, or
yeah, I mean, it's a case of sort of different glasses for different applications, I guess. But I think outside of that, you don't necessarily need people might argue this, but I don't feel that you have to have a virtual reality headset to consume a virtual reality. A lot of the games at the moment, you can sit on your couch at home, you can still have a virtual experience, go and attend a virtual concert in one of these completely alternate games and have a really good kind of experience. So it's, there's lots of ways to consume the metaverse. It's not really limited to, I've got to have a Quest headset, but ultimately, the Quest is a really, doing Facebook a favorite here, but it is a really good device. And anyone, I'd highly recommend that. I think it really is impactful as sort of maybe something like the iPod or iPhone was. It's really a VR headset that I feel's ready at the moment. It's very easy to use. As you say, you can kind of put it on. You've got great things like the pass-through that allows you to kind of, you don't lose that connection from the world completely. I've had to help so many people over the last sort of 7 years, trying to put a headset on and waving their hands around. So it's great stuff, and really just really early days as well in terms of this technology.
I mean, I have to give a shout out to Spencer Gallagher, who kind of got a group of agency leaders together and said, listen, buy a headset, let's do this, and let's just test it out, and we're going to throw a party in the metaverse. And it was so hilarious and so much fun, and I learned so much through doing. And I think, would you say that that's the only way to kind of to get involved, is to actually embrace it and just test it as you go?
Yeah, I think that's like any technology. There is a lot of sort of people at the moment, sort of, you get the really sort of mixed reviews, should we be doing the metaverse? Is it going to take over our lives, or is it ready? But I think really it's just get involved and give it a go, because then you sort of start understanding this technology, and there are applications where it's ready. Absolutely. Any kind of VR at the moment for sort of business enterprise is proven. We're doing so much at the moment with businesses sort of utilizing these technologies.
So talking about businesses, I'm really interested to see, particularly which companies you think, or if you've seen, are the early adopters in this space, and how long do you think it's before others will follow?
Okay, so I guess we have to start with the biggies. So, Facebook rebranding Meta, I think, that's, like them or not, Facebook is still probably, I think they're in the top 10 largest businesses in the world right now. That they've gone out, they've rebranded, they're really sort of trying to claim this space. And I think what we're seeing now is sort of, there's other people just sort of starting to show their cards. So Microsoft is sort of, starting to speak about it quite a lot. Yahoo's been out there. So there's those kind of sort of people doing that. But then, you've got the other side, you've got the kind of content creators or content enablers. So, Epic Games, Unreal, they're providing the tools to help us build the metaverse. So you've got people like that. And then you've got brands now kind of just sort of taking those first steps. Some of them are doing well, some of them, not so great. It's sort of very common in these sort of new spaces. I sort of, Samsung did a sort of event in Decentraland recently, and Samsung, if you need some help, I'm willing to help. It was all right, but look, hats off, they went out and they're using it, and I really think that's a key thing at the moment. I see a lot of people, again, it comes back to sort of Web3 thing. It's getting involved with the metaverse for me is really creating sort of valuable, immersive sort of virtual reality type experiences. Going and minting an NFT doesn't quite cut it. So Samsung's kind of gone all out. They've got into one of these virtual realities and created a kind of virtual space. So it's kind of really interesting to see brands starting to use it. And I think probably one to watch at the moment. Another one of these sort of big virtual realities, if people have heard of it, there's one called the Sandbox. I think Adidas are probably one to watch at the moment. They've just brought a big chunk of land in the Sandbox, so I'd love to see what they're doing with that. They've sort of had it a while, so hopefully creating some really good content.
So, gosh, so many questions have come up. First of all, like, just explain to me, what did Samsung do and how did you get to find out about it? Like, how are you plugged in to know that they're doing something, or are you just constantly watching this space and immersed in it? Like,
Yeah, so I'm quite involved all over this space. I mean, I actually own land in some of these platforms, so I sort of, personally, so I've got a bit of an interest in them anyway. But Samsung, they did it as part, they were attending CES, so they did a sort of, I guess, sort of brand type activation. But again, it was a lot more, it's good PR, I guess, in the metaverse. But I think they could have done a lot more to kind of build a better experience. It's sort of classic. We saw a lot of this when we were sort of first doing VR. Brands just sort of trying it out. I do really sort of want to encourage brands to do these things properly, and you really get you'll get a really good experience out of them.
and what would you have, I mean, what would you say would be, you could have done this much, you could have done this and it would have been so much better? What would this be?
Yeah, I think it was, again, it was, they'd put the content, they'd created this experience, but the experience was quite weak. It was a lot of people just sort of walking around when, most of the chat was sort of people trying to work out what they were trying to do and getting frustrated with it. So it sort of, it was sort of, theatre over kind of substance. And I think just to think that experience through, and like all of these things, it's all about content creation. We always do that diverse and sort of content creation and user experience. Lead with those two things, get your content right and get your user experience good, and then the tech sort of sits under that, really.
And you are a good benchmark for knowing what good is, as you say, because you've been immersed in it for so long.
Yeah.
And the thing about you having land, did you buy the land? I suppose I'm just really curious, when you're buying this virtual land, are the prices going up, going down? Like, are you watching a market? Is there a limit? Like,
Okay.
where do you buy the land? Can you just sort of enlighten me a bit?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting space. So I'm not, I've dabbled a little bit with the crypto, but that for me is just gambling. But the land's really interesting because it's one of these applications. I mentioned it earlier, where I see a value in. It comes back to this smart contract again, and this ownership. So these platforms, they're not going away, right? These are big platforms. They're established. They're using the blockchain kind of below their platform, so that's always going to exist in the blockchain. Now, once that's land and those contracts have been created, they're not going away. They're there for good. And then the experience that's been built on top, these virtual realities, they're just going to get increasingly better. I have heard sort of Decentraland getting some sort of bad feedback. People not sort of think, oh, the graphics are a bit out of date. But they're doing some really clever stuff. They're focused on web technology. They've got some limitations there, but it's very accessible, and they're very much focusing on the kind of decentralized sort of model. Access for everyone, open platform, and the web's where that comes. So that they've made that decision. But this technology just gets better and better. So that experience is only going to get more valuable. It's kind of sort of separate from the blockchain that sits below. So I see that as an investment, and again, I don't want to give investment advice. I could be completely wrong, but I see the value there. And again, for me, it's supporting these platforms, but also there's so much I can do. Now you've got, once you own that land, sort of you can build your own content, that gives you the right to put your own content on that land. So again, if you're sort of a brand or a business wanting to get involved, you can own that land. And then again, it's really down to the content creation skills and looking at the user experience for what you put on that land. You've got quite sort of open platforms here in terms of what you can deliver. Very much like, if you created a website, it's a similar thing. You're just creating, experiences within virtual realities rather than a kind of flat web page.
Oh my goodness, I never thought of it like this. So basically, would you draw parallels with buying your website domain years ago? When you've got your domain, then you can use that space on the web to
absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing as well. Yeah. So there are sort of people using blockchain for sort of as an alternative to sort of, if people are familiar with the term, kind of DNS, but you know, a way of sort of accessing a computer by name. So there's sort of ways around that, or just these LANs. But yeah, I really like it when it's, you know, when it's combined with these sort of virtual realities, because that's exactly it. Really, it's allowing you to have ownership and create virtual goods within these realities, and that's where I really do see the value. I think, you know, I am mixed with the sort of NFT digital art space. How much value is there? It's hard to tell, but as soon as you combine that into one of these platforms, I feel the value is a lot more protected. You know, you're using this content within this world. You know, there's a lot of people in that world. You know, if you buying the avatar or the, you know, the house or whatever it is, it's giving you things within that world, and that world's almost sort of protecting the value a bit more than, you know, here's a image that I've written to the blockchain. What's that going to be worth, you know, in the next 5 years?
So are you seeing a trend with companies, brands just going in and purchasing land and just holding it and thinking, right, we're going to keep that spot, but we don't quite know what we're going to do with it?
Yeah. That is happening. I mean, the other interesting thing here is, you know, you can not only buy land, but you can rent land. So, you know, if you're a brand, you don't necessarily have to go and buy some land. You know, you can, you know, these can be temporary kind of things. So you could create a content experience on that piece of land for a temporary period. So, yeah, like you say, there's people who are investing to, you know, almost sort of utilize that land for other people. But equally, you know, there are sort of platforms right now where it's not a big spend compared to, you know, what brands are sort of spending on events, physical events, things like that. So
that's such a good point, actually. So I'm interested, because we're in the agency space and we are usually leading, you know, our marketing clients with what they're going to do with their brands, how they're going to promote themselves. So how do you think marketing products and services will change in the metaverse?
okay, that's a big question. So
Huge
I think,
questions for you today,
yeah,
Ben. Sorry.
okay. So, you know, I think, you know, we started touching on it there. You know, we're getting these virtual realities that we can kind of exist in, or brands can exist in, businesses can exist in, and that for sort of agencies, you know, the content creation alone, when you're creating, you know, a virtual world is huge. So, but not only that, you know, every kind of, I think every agency right now, whatever space or niche you're in, there's a kind of, there's opportunities here, you know, to kind of help brands. You know, if you're a branding agency, how they're going to exist. I was speaking to a personal branding agency the other day, and it's sort of like, you know, when you're you and all these different virtual realities, are you the same person? How do you and you have sort of complete freedom in these realities as well, which I find really interesting. You're not sort of constrained. Your product can be right there in front of someone, and you're not only controlling the way that product looks, behaves, but also the environment around it and how that person experiences your brand, or, you know, a very kind of immersive sort of experience.
When you, for brands, going back to a couple of steps, what you talked about, the blockchain and the fact that it's decentralized, do brands to a certain extent have to give up their kind of ownership of the brand and put it out there to their customers to kind of interpret what their brand means?
So that's another really interesting question. So it's very hard with the decentralization. So I'm sort of a fan of it, and I think there's values there, right? But it's almost sort of getting political in terms of, you know, it's interesting when you decentralize everything, you know, and it's, you know, we think about things go back in past, things like peer-to-peer file sharing or the dark web or the, you know, it's hard. I sort of feel like the centralization is sort of required at a level. I think there's a movement. You know, I think what's valuable in these is, you know, we are creating these kind of shared experiences. So, you know, I love the sort of community element around it at the moment, and you know, you're, as a brand, you're thinking about how you exist in these different virtual realities. You know, a fortnight might be different from a roadblock to the the type of audience and the community within that. So I think sort of you should sort of think about how you present yourself, but I don't want to get, the whole sort of decentralized movement's an interesting one. I think it's one where we just sort of have to watch, how far can we take that as sort of businesses.
What role do you see agencies playing in the future to help the clients navigate the metaverse? I mean, you say there's opportunities abounding at the moment. What kind of opportunities do you see for them?
Okay, so I mean, I guess I have to go back. You have to think of this. It's almost sort of as impactful as social. You think about something like social. And I was actually chatting to an agency owner earlier who was like, "Well, how do I?" He's got a brand agency, and it was sort of how do I use the metaverse? I don't understand it. It's sort of like, well, it's a bit like asking how do you use social. There's all these platforms, there's all these ways into it, and as an agency, you're really looking for how can I bring that to my sort of niche or my client. What's the application? Is a virtual reality, is one of these virtual worlds right for my brand? Can I bring them to them? So it's sort of there's that kind of level where we're trying to find these ways that we can help our clients sort of use this space. And again, what's really interesting is I think everyone I spoke to recently who's an agency owner, we just have these really great chats because everyone's got their sort of own niche, whether it's sort of content creation, branding, software, everyone's got their little niche. And as soon as you start talking about it, you start coming up with these ideas of sort of how you could utilize the metaverse. So it's really exciting for me. It's just, again, I think it just sort of summarizes sort of what a kind of huge space it is. So I guess it's sort of that element of it, but the other element I think for agencies as well, it's not only changing what our clients are doing, it's going to change what we're doing as well. It's going to change our own businesses. In you mentioned earlier having a metaverse meet up with other agency owners. Let's get the clients in. It's kind of we can go and show them these spaces, share those experiences with them, and then that will really sort of help them adopt the kind of technology and understand how it can be used.
I mean, maybe this is an obvious question, but do you think that agencies really need to keep an eye on how much this is changing? Because agencies typically want to be ahead of the game, but clients are just as interested in this space and they're already kind of testing things. And I suppose my other question is, do you think that it works particularly well where a brand already has a very kind of tight community of customers who are really interested in following them?
I think it's like any space. Again, it's going to suit. Right now, there's going to be brands it might not suit. If we were sort of using blockchain in the equation, I don't really like to use blockchain because, like I say, I can deliver you a virtual reality experience or augmented reality experience with no blockchain involved. But something like environmental impact, that is a barrier at the moment to some brands, as an example, sort of getting involved. But I think that the sort of question there about what I think it feels like sometimes almost like there's this sort of pressure with technology to kind of, we're falling behind. I've been doing this for 20 years, right? That's always there, and it's really, I think my advice to anyone is really focus on the applications of the technology. Not necessarily trying to sort of understand it. People like me worry about that, but it's really sort of what can this technology do? Is it ready for me? Is it ready for my clients? And then sort of have a chat with an expert and find those applications and then kind of bring them to your clients. But don't feel behind. There's plenty of time, and I think this is a sort of long game, this one.
Right, I think that's really good advice. I've got a random question for you. Which agencies do you think should be paying more attention to this specifically? Like, I'm thinking particularly performance marketing agencies, for example, who have paid search, paid social, and it's all about the social media platforms and Google. Like, have you got any thoughts on how that's going to evolve?
Yeah, so again, that's definitely a space I think you need to keep an eye on it. We know how fast things like this is really social again. It's sort of things like TikTok, you know, these technologies come in fast and change quickly. And I think the metaverse, you know, they do need to sort of keep an eye on that in terms of, you know, these sort of realities, virtual realities or augmented realities that are kind of sort of being created as a sort of platform that you can exist in, or your customers can exist in. So I think it's sort of keeping an eye on those spaces, and just sort of, you know, there's going to be places where there's a sort of obvious fit for a brand. I think, you know, again, these are quite tailored because these platforms have been created. There's something like a game, for example, that's going to fit a certain kind of set of users. You know, something like perhaps you know, Facebook Horizons, you know, it's quite an open platform, that's going to suit a sort of another type of user. So it's sort of really sort of seeing where you think your customers might live in these realities, and finding your way, really.
Good advice as well. So tell me, can you share some examples of maybe the clients that you've been helping to give this a real kind of, you know, looking at specific case studies and examples, real tangible examples? Because I suppose everyone's at a different point in the adoption curve, aren't they, with this?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of projects, and I think this comes back to this sort of longer game thing. You know, the last 7 years we're building AR and VR experiences, and I think every AR and VR experience we learn something new to kind of sort of pass on. But I really like the, you know, the applications where it's bringing value to a business. You know, everyone has to do their kind of brand act, you know, PR type projects, but you know, I'm a really big fan of the ones where we can, you know, really make a difference through these kind of technologies to be utilized in the metaverse. And I think a recent one that I really love was you know, we worked with Lynn Group, who is a logistics company, and you know, it's a sort of over a 2-year time frame. We built this kind of mobile virtual reality training system, and you know, we replaced what was a traditional kind of day off the road for the drivers, very expensive, one location in the country where they have to go and do a very sort of traditional learning, to a immersive driving experience that tours the country, goes to the drivers, now takes them less than 40 minutes to go through it. The driver trainers are really happy because it's sort of giving them, you know, understanding of driver behavior that they just have never had before, because we're using things like eye tracking technology in the VR headset, so they can sort of, you know, they sort of have this ability to play back the experience and with the driver, and they can see where they were looking and have really sort of valuable conversations. So, you know, it's applications like that, and where I just love that we can get involved, and the metaverse is just allowing us to provide more and more of these types of experiences more easily, you know, as the technology sort of comes in. You know, again, we come back to the Quest headset, you know, that's a £300 headset, you know, that's at a price now that, you know, everyone can get involved. And you know, we're working very closely with a college called USP College at the moment. We've got an immersive training center that we've built with them, and you know, we're sort of changing education, you know, bringing these technologies in, you know, how people can teach and experience learning through VR.
I love this. I mean, presumably it's being accelerated by the fact that we've just spent the last 2.5 years in a global pandemic where lots of people have been housebound and homebound, and there isn't the luxury, or there hasn't been the luxury, of sending all your drivers, for example, to a center somewhere. They're all driving from different parts of the country to then have a one day, and presumably they have to pay the costs of staying overnight, blah blah blah. Yeah. So coming up with that immersive technology where you can do it all, takes 40 minutes, and you can do it from your own home. That's pretty.
This is it. And there's just kind of no-brainer applications now for sort of brands, you know, not only training, you know, just brand experiences for you know, get back into the sort of virtual goods and the virtual services where you've not only got your own goods presenting them, but actually there's a lot of space now for brands to create their own virtual goods. You know, we touched on it earlier with sort of fashion. So there's just so much people can do right now today, but equally, you know, we've still got this longer journey, so this is just going to become more and more part of our lives.
I was just thinking, because I'm actually selfishly thinking about my own training business and, you know, other training providers that are seeing that there may be an opportunity to have more of an immersive training environment. And, you know, we're now coming out of being locked down and everything and coming back into face-to-face training. But like you said, with your example of your client company, where they must have slashed their training budget on the one hand with external costs of sending people somewhere and all the cost of their time, but just having this virtual training experience. So I was just wondering about training as the natural gateway for many companies to experiment a little bit with virtual experiences.
Yeah, it's certainly an area, you know, like I said, there's no brainer applications, I think, for any business within training, but I think it goes a lot more broader than that. You know, we do a lot of training work, but we do a lot of, you know, sales sort of applications is big for us. We're building a project at the moment, which is kind of like a sort of virtual sales tool. So it was actually born out of a business who were, you know, they were a very sort of, will go out, their pharma company will go out and sort of bring devices to the customer and demo the device, and sort of lockdown really gave them a Zoom call, and then they've just been left with like, okay, you know, their sales pitch is like, here's loads of documents that we've pulled together and videos, and they're trying to sort of sell a product, and they've got loads of challenges, you know, these are sort of expensive bits of equipment, and, you know, questions like, you know, how does it fit in my lab, things like that, and you know, they're sort of resorted to sort of, you know, going through PDF manuals showing them the dimensions on the screen. So, you know, we're yeah, exactly. So, you know, we've helped them, and this is a project that's in production at the moment, but we've built this completely virtual lab experience that runs in a web browser on any device. So their sales reps can either sort of screen share that or take that to a customer. They can explore the lab, go into products, and then view the products, you know, in 3D within the browser. So they can sort of look around the product, demo the product, really get into the product, sort of show them how the door opens, things like that. And then on top of that, you know, we've built a feature using augmented reality, so they can demo these products, and the customer can literally scan a QR code on the sales rep screen and then view the product life size with no app download in the room, sort of sat right next to them. So, you know, sales applications are kind of really big for us. And then again, you know, moving more into these sort of more metaverse and fully immersive experiences, any sort of, you know, brand activation, you know, touched on events, you know, being able to sort of have the sort of, I guess you'd call it hybrid at the moment, sort of have, you know, be able to have a virtual experience as well is a really sort of good space, or just anywhere where you want to show someone a product in one of these sort of virtual realities.
I saw that you posted on LinkedIn a while ago that you were going to this metaverse event, that I think it was a concert or a series of concerts. Like, talk us through how, I mean, what is that the norm now, that people are going to these virtual events?
Again, it's just one of these things they're just becoming better and better. And I think, you know, that was a Decentraland event, the Metaverse Festival. And, you know, it blew me away, that experience, and they've done a really good job on the content creation. I think, again, if what we were saying earlier, you know, the user experience and the content creation for the platform's kind of capabilities was really, really good. And there's just a couple of moments, you know, in that, and it wasn't just about the kind of content experience. It was this kind of connection, you know, everyone, you know, you could, it sounds weird, but even though you're on your own, you could sort of feel these people around you having that shared experience, you know, and, you know, you got the sort of live music, and you could sort of see the chat, and everyone was sort of feeling it, you know, this kind of sort of moment like you'd have at a real festival. I'm not, it's not going to replace real festivals. I think it's a different class of experience, but it's certainly, you know, really valuable experiences, you know, as a brand or business you can get involved with, and you know, give your customers a really good experience.
Wow, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I must say that when we did that virtual experience ourselves, I mean, Andrew Dobby popped up right next to me, and I could hear his voice, you know, and I'm Andrew. And it felt so, I mean, I know that I'm new to the space, but for example, Ben, because I was really interested in going to that event, but at the time I didn't have my Oculus headset. If I'd have had the Oculus headset, would I have been able to?
Well, actually, interesting. So Decentraland doesn't require any headsets. So this is one of the ones that runs actually within a web browser.
Okay.
So again, this very comes back. I think, you know, like I said earlier, I don't really say that you have to have a VR headset to consume the metaverse. Really, you know, you don't have to put a headset on to have, you know, consume one of these virtual realities. That you can, and that gives you a more immersive experience, and there's applications there where you want to use a headset, but equally there's so much you can do, and especially sort of the augmented reality space. You know, I really love that space because, you know, you take a lot of that away, just having these sort of enhancing your reality. You know, I was speaking to someone about sort of e-commerce in the metaverse and kind of the future of that, and you know, another very common question, you know, is the metaverse going to replace, you know, shopping anytime? So this kind of thing, and no, for me it's this thing, it's just going to enhance it. You know, when you've got your AR glasses and you're out and about in the shops, you know, you're enhancing that shopping experience. We're still going to want to go and, you know, experience these physical goods, but we can actually make that experience better by bringing sort of AR technologies in. You can have the virtual as well, but I think it's hand in hand. You can have both, really. Neither are going to sort of replace one of these things.
I see. So it's going to enhance our real life experience, but also you can go into the virtual world, and that's going to be more, you know.
That's it. Yeah. You know,
Great. I mean, how do you see the agencies changing in the next 10 years? Like, do you see that there are going to be more people like you popping up who, I mean, obviously haven't been doing this for as long, but are you seeing that there's an interest from agencies in terms of getting involved and leading their clients in this area?
Yeah, I mean, again, when we sort of mentioned earlier, it's a big question, this one. Let me think.
I know.
Next 10 years. I can ask it again.
So where do you think we're going to be as agencies in the next 10 years? And don't worry, I mean, no one's got a crystal ball, but I'm just interested in your thoughts.
So I think, you know, we've got to look at this as these, you know, we touched on it a lot. The metaverse is just going to come increasingly more and more a part of our lives and our customers' lives and our employees' lives. So, you know, we're going to have to sort of, I think the change is really just going to be us adopting this technology more and more and working with it. So, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not just for our customers or our clients, it's also for us, and it's going to change the way we're doing things. So I think, you know, it's really sort of thinking about, you know, yourself in these virtual realities. You know, you're a brand just as much as your client. So if you want to, you know, present your agency within one of these virtual realities, how are you going to do that? Are you going to buy a virtual office or a virtual demo room for your clients to come and attend? So that, you know, there's all sorts of ways. I think, you know, you can dream up all sorts of ways. I think over the next 10 years, this technology gets better, that you could kind of get involved as an agency.
I think it was good advice, actually, getting agencies to experiment now and early so that they're already doing it for themselves and the marketing
Absolutely.
of their agencies for themselves now. And as the technology evolves, as you say, you're just becoming more proficient with it.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to anyone listening who feels that they might be falling behind? Like, I don't even understand what Ben's talking about. You know, I haven't been on Fortnite. I don't know what Decentraland is. NFTs, you know, God knows where to start. I mean, any advice for anyone listening?
So I think straight off, don't feel that way. You know, again, it's that the pressure of the ever moving technology. I think, you know, it's focus on what these things can do, and you know, I think it's been a bit of a theme. Just get involved. You know, give these things a go. Don't sort of, you know, push it away because you don't understand it. It's sort of, you know, just you know, go and buy a Quest, have a go, you know, get involved, and I think you'll find these sort of areas where actually, oh yeah, there might be a fit there, and then again, you know, have have a chat. I love having these conversations with people. If you find that application, we think actually this could be something I could use, have a chat with an expert and see if it's something we can kind of help with.
Amazing. And to that point, Ben, how can people get hold of you, and who are the people that you want to hear from?
Okay, so again, we work with such a broad range of kind of clients that diverse, but we're not tied to sort of any real sector. So anyone wanting to get involved with the metaverse, we're here to help, and that's agencies or kind of end clients. And really, if you want to get in contact, there's LinkedIn. That's probably my go-to. Gets lost in the email inbox. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and then from there, if we want to go and perhaps meet up in the metaverse, I accept most kind of virtual reality platforms that we can go and experience together.
What a great idea. And we'll make sure that we put that in the show notes, your LinkedIn. And actually, I think everyone listening, there's this new feature on LinkedIn where you can just click a bell so that any content that you put out, because I know you've been putting a lot of thought leadership pieces and really, really interesting educational pieces. I would recommend anyone to follow Ben, because you really are at the forefront, and you managed to kind of make everything sound more simple than it actually is, I imagine.
Yeah.
So well done.
Click my bell on LinkedIn.
Click your bell. Lovely. Well, Ben, listen, is there any question that I haven't asked you, or any aspect of the metaverse that I haven't covered that you think would be interesting to the agency community audience?
Another question. Let me think. Ask that again.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have done?
Why is that such a hard question?
From my perspective, I love people to come away with ideas, and you've already dropped so many examples of platform names and tools and ideas. And for me, it's making sure that everyone who's listening to this has a kind of better understanding of what the metaverse is. So I'm just curious if there's anything that we haven't touched upon that you think would be useful.
Hard. I mean, we touched on like most of it. I think it is this sort of thing about just giving it a go. It seems to be a sort of the theme, but we just answered that one.
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's cool. Brilliant. Well, listen, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. I love what you're putting out on LinkedIn. I love following you and learning myself. So thank you for being at the forefront of what's changing. Really appreciate it.
No problem. It's been really good.
All right. Brilliant.
Okay.